Okay, so this is the second part of our 2 week study on Genesis 40 and 41, and we're going to be focusing on Genesis 41 in this study. So I am trying to get this recorded early so that it's up and available concurrent with the first part. So don't get confused that this study is not the first part, and I'm going to go back and watch that one first. Um, and the text for today says, when 2 full years had passed, Pharaoh had a dream. He was standing by the Nile when out of the river came up 7 cows, sleek and fat, and they grazed among the reeds. After them, 7 other cows, ugly and gaunt, came out of the Nile and stood beside those on the river bank. And the cows that were ugly and gaunt ate up the 7 sleek fat cows. Then Pharaoh woke up. He fell asleep again and had a second dream. 7 heads of grain, healthy and good, were growing on a single stalk. After them, 7 other heads of grain sprouted, thin and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 healthy full heads. Then Pharaoh woke up. It had been a dream. In the morning his mind was troubled, so he sent for all the magicians and wise men of Egypt. Pharaoh told them his dream, but no one could interpret them for him. Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, today I'm reminded of my shortcomings. Pharaoh was once angry with his servants, and he imprisoned me and the chief baker in the house of the captain of the guard. Each of us had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. Now a young Hebrew was there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us, giving each man the interpretation of his dream. And things turned out exactly as he interpreted them to us. I was restored to my position, and the other man was impaled. So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought from the dungeon. When he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came before Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream, and no one can interpret it. But I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. I cannot, Joseph replied to Pharaoh, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, in my dream I was standing on the bank of the Nile, when out of the river there came up 7 cows, fat and sleek, and they grazed among the reeds. After them 7 other cows came up, scrawny and very ugly and lean. I had never seen such ugly cows in all the land of Egypt. The lean, ugly cows ate up the 7 fat cows that came up first. But even after they ate them, no one could tell that they had done so. They looked just as ugly as before. Then I woke up. In my dream, I saw 7 heads of grain, full and good, growing up on a single stalk. After them, 7 other heads sprouted, withered and thin, and scorched by the east wind. The heads of grain swallowed up, the thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 good heads. I told this to the magicians, but none of them could explain it to me. Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, the dreams of Pharaoh are one and the same. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads of grain are 7 years. It is one and the same dream. The 7 lean, ugly cows that came up afterward are 7 years, and so are the 7 worthless heads of grain scorched by the east wind. They are 7 years of famine. It is just as I said to Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. 7 years of great abundance are coming throughout the land of Egypt, but 7 years of famine will follow them. Then all the abundance in Egypt will be forgotten, and the famine will ravage the land. The abundance in the land will not be remembered because the famine that follows will be so severe. The reason the dream was given to Pharaoh in 2 forms is that the matter has been firmly decided by God, and God will do it soon. And now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take a fifth of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all the food of these good years that are coming and store up grain under the authority of Pharaoh to be kept in the cities for food. This food should be held in reserve for the country to be used during the 7 years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so that the country may not be ruined by the famine. The plan seemed good to Pharaoh and all his officials, so Pharaoh asked them, "Can we find anyone like this man, one in whom the Spirit is the Spirit of God?" Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you." Excuse me. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt." Then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his finger and put it on Joseph's finger. He dressed him in robes of fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. He had him ride in a chariot as his second in command, and people shouted before him, "Make way!" Thus he put him in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I am Pharaoh, but without your word no one will lift a hand or foot in all of Egypt." Pharaoh gave Joseph the name Zaphenath-Paneah and gave him Asenath, daughter of Potiphera, priest of On, to be his wife, and Joseph went through the land of Egypt. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered service of Pharaoh king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from Pharaoh's presence and traveled throughout Egypt. During the 7 years of abundance, the land produced plentifully. Joseph collected all the food produced in those 7 years of abundance and stored it in the city. In each city, he put food grown in the fields surrounding it. Joseph stored up huge quantities of grain, like the sand of the sea. It was so much that he stopped keeping records because it was beyond measure. Before the years of famine came, two sons were born to Joseph by Asenath, daughter of Potiphera the priest of On. Joseph named his firstborn Manasseh and said, "It is because God has made me forget all of my trouble and all my father's household." The second son he named Ephraim and said, "It is because God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering." I just want to stop there and no, I don't think we're going to talk about this much in the Bible study, um, but those are um, key names because when Israel is given the promised land, um, the Levites do not get an inheritance. The Levites become the priests, um, but um, basically the children of Joseph, Manasseh and Ephraim, become as if they were two tribes. And so the blessing on Joseph really continues even into the promised land. Um, and we'll read how that happens, I think, as we go. Um, the 7 years of abundance in Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began, just as Joseph had said. There was famine in all the other lands, but in the whole land of Egypt there was food. When all Egypt began to feel the famine, the people cried to Pharaoh for food. Then Pharaoh told all the Egyptians, "Go to Joseph and do what he tells you." When the famine had spread over the whole country, Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe throughout Egypt. And all the world came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph because the famine was severe everywhere. And that is very much a foreshadowing passage about what is to come. Because all the world came, including Joseph's part of it. All right. Remember, you can download PDF copies of this Bible study if you haven't already at www.abqnaz.org/alive so that you can follow along with us. Number one, in the second part of the Bible study, says, what were Pharaoh's dreams according to 41:1-7? A. Joseph was standing by the Nile when out of the river came up 7 cows, sleek and fat, and they grazed, not graced, grazed among the reeds. B. After them, 7 other cows, ugly and gaunt, came up out of the Nile and stood beside the others and ate the first cows. And by the way, in his description later on, he says, and after they had ate the fat cows, you couldn't even tell they had eaten the fat cows. They were still just as ugly as before. C. 7 heads of grain, healthy and good, were growing on a single stalk. That's true. And then D, after them, 7 other heads of grain sprouted, thin and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 healthy full heads, which I imagine the whole scene was kind of disturbing and crazy to watch. But cows eating other cows, probably not normal, but the idea of grain swallowing up other grain was definitely something that this was not something that would have been seen. This seemed to be something, and the fact that 2 dreams sort of mirrored each other was probably the disturbing part. Probably made Pharaoh think. I think in the last Bible study we talked. This is not your cue to start interpreting all your friends' dreams or looking for interpretations of yours. Maybe you had gas. Maybe you spent too much time in the cornfield. But there were some signals here that there might be something to these dreams. Number 2, what did Joseph say to Pharaoh when he asked Joseph to interpret his dreams in 41:15-16? A, yeah, sure, no problem. Anything to get out of that dungeon. And that's what I would have said. Whether I thought I could do it or not, and then I would have just desperately begged God that he has to come through. But Joseph said something that, to me, if Pharaoh didn't want to listen till the end, which, like, sometimes I write long emails, and I notice that people send emails back to me when they've read the first sentence, and they don't even read to the end when the answer to the question they emailed me back about was actually at the end of the email and showed me they didn't read it. But anyway, so it's really common. If Pharaoh didn't want to listen till the end, he might have just sent him back to the dungeon here. Because Joseph responded, I cannot do it. But then he said, see, God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. So he says, I'm not the guy. I can't do it, but God will give you the answer. And the indication is that God is working through him and that Joseph refused to take credit for the thing that God was about to do. Even though the fact that God was with him had been to his advantage in previous situations and would be again here. Um, he wants to make sure that God gets the glory for this. Number 3, what was the interpretation that Joseph gave Pharaoh according to 41:25-32? A, first of all, the dreams are one and the same. B, God has revealed what he is about to do. So I told you God was going to reveal. God is giving you this dream. He's trying to reveal to you what's going to happen. C, there will be 7 years of great abundance throughout the land of Egypt, but 7 years of famine will follow them. And then D, all the abundance in Egypt will be forgotten because the famine that follows will be so severe. So we're looking at such a severe famine that whatever abundance happened before would be insignificant and not even matter. People would forget it. And then E, the matter has been firmly decided and will happen soon. He says that there were 2 dreams because it's done. This is already in motion and it's decided and it's about to happen. Number 4, what advice did Joseph give as a conclusion following his interpretation according to 41:33-36? Now, I assume that it's understood that this also comes from God, but sort of Joseph offers this as why else would God have given you um, what is about to happen except for that he wants you to do something about it, except for that he wants you to use the beginning to plan for the end, use the first thing that's happening to plan for the second thing. So A says, let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Joseph didn't volunteer, but he said, do this. B, let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take a fifth of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance and store them up for under the authority of Pharaoh. So basically, he's advocating for a 20% tax. This 20% tax during the healthy years will be used to feed everybody during the famine years. C. These would be kept in the cities for food and to be held in reserve for the country, to be used during the 7 years of famine so that the country will not be ruined. And it does specifically say, I know there's a tendency, if I call this a tax, to get political, but it does say that they were kept in the localities and the cities from the fields surrounding them. So he didn't bring them all to one central location. He kept them in the areas where they were grown and stored them in the cities, sort of at the center of those farming areas. Number 5, how did Pharaoh respond according to 41:37 through 44? A, the plan seemed good to Pharaoh and to all the officials. He talked about it with the officials. They said, this sounds like a good idea. He's right. This is what we should do. B, Pharaoh asked the officials, can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God? In other words, if we like the plan was given to us by Joseph, because God was with him and God gave him the interpretation of these dreams. I don't know if he asked around to see about Joseph's faithfulness as a slave and in prison, but when God is with Joseph, it goes really well. So he asked his officials, is there anybody else that even rises to the task? Is there anybody else who has the sort of wisdom and discernment that this man has? And the obvious answer is no. Can you imagine? What if we had God's presence with us in such a way that when our boss was looking for somebody to take care of something that was very important, that needed somebody wise and discerning, they said, is there anybody else who has the Spirit of God with them like this person, in a way that everything that they do feels like it was touched by God? And then everybody says, no, I want that to be said of me. See, Pharaoh put Joseph in charge of his palace, and all his people were to submit to his orders. D. Joseph was very important, let's just put it that way. So that's like a summary. He was second in command only to Pharaoh. Even though Pharaoh was Pharaoh, nobody lifted a hand or a foot without Joseph saying so. So it was Joseph that was in charge of him, of what went on. Joseph was dressed like royalty. Joseph was put at Pharaoh's right hand, and he was his second in command. And when he rode in a chariot, people said, make way. All of this just points to how important Joseph was. What just happened was the same thing that had happened when he was a slave and when he was in prison, only now sort of the venue where Joseph is being put in charge is the entire nation of Egypt and the household and palace of Pharaoh. Number 6, what happened in 41:45 through 57? A, Joseph got a name and a wife and went around throughout Egypt putting his plan in place. That's true. B, Joseph was 30 years old at this point and stored up huge quantities of food. So a couple of things. What that means is that he was a slave and a prisoner for a long time. Basically, probably that started when he was young, maybe a teenager or even before, when he was sold into slavery. And so half his life he's been in slavery and in prison at this point. And now he's being given a wife who I assume was beautiful and the wife that everybody wishes that they would have had, in every way important. And we're not told anything about her personality or her godliness, which are obviously things that are important to us. But all the things that the world would want anyway. Um, so he then he stored up huge quantities of food. We're told that he stored up so much that he stopped keeping count because it was too much to keep record of. And then see, before the years of famine came, Joseph had two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And I stopped in the text to tell you that that's significant. You can go forward and look at those if you'd like to. D. Joseph said, "It is because God made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household, and it is because God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering." So he used those names because of these things and recognized that God was answering his prayers and taking care of him. E. When the years of famine came throughout the whole land of Egypt, Pharaoh told everyone to go to Joseph and do what he tells you. That reminds me of when Jesus is at the wedding banquet and Mary, they run out of wine, and Mary says, "Go do what he tells you." I don't know if that's an intentional callback, but it definitely reminds me of that. When something runs out, this is the one that can do something about it. F. Joseph opened up all the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians, and all the world came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph. And this is definitely an intentional foreshadowing of what's to come, because Joseph's own people, his own family, are going to show up soon. And so that's an important part of the story uh, that we're looking forward to. So, anyway, good stories of God's blessing in the life of Joseph, which is something that's significant in biblical history. So,